Good morning. A few weeks ago, I received a telephone call asking if I would share personal reflections about our guest speaker this morning, Jessica Buchanan, because she was a graduate of our education department. I was very honored to receive that call and very humbly accepted, as I am now, to present to you a wonderful, strong lady who went through unbelievable hardships, which you will hear in a few minutes. I read her book, and I was, again, deeply impressed with the inner strength and the fact that she kept saying, I'm going to get through this, I'm going to get through this. But that's going to be shared a little bit later. Permit me to share some reflections about Jessica. Jessica enrolled in Valley Forge Christian College, our former name, in the fall of 2003 in the education department, which at that time included 142 credits, as opposed to today it's 120. She was able to finish all those courses in the 8 semesters. I was privileged to have Jessica in many of my classes, and if I remember correctly, she was an excellent student and received above average A and B grades. As we anticipated her completing the academic program prior to student teaching, I interviewed her as to her preferences for a student teaching placement. She sat across from me in my office to discuss this for the spring semester of 2007. As with all education majors, the final program requirement is to participate in a full-time, all-semester-long student teaching experience. She said right off, I want to teach in Nairobi. I said, Nairobi? She said, yes, Nairobi, Kenya. I kind of thought Nairobi was some kind of city in New York. I didn't quite get the connection right away. She says, yes, Nairobi, Kenya, Africa. I said, Africa? Yes. She said she had been working there with children, and she wanted to return because of those children and eventually go back to become a teacher in Nairobi. She had the look. I can't describe the look. It was not a malicious look. It was a look of determination. It was a look of, do it. Place me there. Gentlemen, if she ever gives you that look, I don't know how to describe it, but you'll know it when it comes. Do it. Don't compromise. Don't ask. Just do it. It'll save you a lot of hardship. Anyway, I said, oh boy. I called the Department of Education in our state capital. They had an issue when I called before and said, I want to place a student teacher in New Jersey, and they said, we prefer Pennsylvania. You are a Pennsylvania institution. We prefer all student teachers to be placed in Pennsylvania. Well, I decided to call them again. I said, I have a student who wants to student teach in Africa, Nairobi. Response was, great. Just make sure she's with a certified teacher. Don't figure. I don't call them anymore. I just do it. After many emails with a school principal in Nairobi, as we exchanged educational programs and expectations, Jessica received a student teaching placement in Nairobi at Roslyn Academy. I think she student taught in 2 grades, perhaps 1 and 6, if I remember correctly. She completed that student teaching assignment with accolades. She came back to Valley Forge to graduate with honors. She received Pennsylvania's public school teaching certificate in elementary education. She returned to Nairobi and was hired as a full-time teacher in a 4th grade at Roslyn Academy. But Jessica's story continues. And to do that, I'm going to ask Reverend Lee Rogers to join me on the platform. Reverend Rogers. Reverend Rogers and his wife, Christine, Kiki, also an education graduate, are co-presidents of the Valley Forge Alumni Association. Again, welcome, Reverend Rogers.
Thank you, Dr. McClure. Well, you are a beautiful audience today, so turn to the person next to you, tell them they look beautiful. Go ahead. Good. Turn to the person on the other side, tell them they look beautiful. We all need this encouragement from time to time. Very good. As co-presidents of the Alumni Association, it's our distinct honor to give several awards each year. During homecoming, we give 2 awards, a Young Alumni Award and a Distinguished Alumni Award. We will give the Distinguished Alumni Award on Friday to Dr. Steve Torville, and that is an award that goes to alumni who have been out of our institution for many years, usually a few decades, who have achieved excellence in their life's work with respect to the mission of our school. The mission of the University of Valley Forge is to prepare individuals for a life of service and leadership in the church and in the world. The Young Alumni Award, which we will give today, goes to graduates who have been out of the school, usually less than 15 years, who have done things in just those short years that have distinguished themselves with respect to the mission of service and leadership. Today, we're honored to give that award to Jessica Buchanan, who is a teacher, author, humanitarian, speaker, mother, daughter, and survivor. In the summer of 2006, Jessica Buchanan followed her dream and left for Africa. She traveled through areas of South Sudan, Uganda, Kenya, and Rwanda, volunteering in different capacities, and then was fortunate enough to secure a teaching position at an international school based in Nairobi, Kenya, the Roslyn Academy. She was eventually offered a full-time teaching position, and in 2009, she married Eric Landemam, a native Swede she had met while working in Nairobi, who worked strengthening judiciary and legislative institutions in East Africa. After a beautiful celebration, Jessica left her teaching position and relocated to Hargeisa, Somaliland, to join her new husband and begin her next adventure. Jessica eventually took on the role as the regional education advisor for the Danish demining group, the mine action unit of the Danish Refugee Council, and worked with issues related to armed violence reduction and community safety in the areas of Somaliland, Somalia, Uganda, and South Sudan. On October 25, 2011, while on a routine field mission in Somalia, Jessica, along with a colleague, were abducted at gunpoint and held ransom by a group of Somaliland pirates for 93 days. Jessica was held outdoors in deplorable conditions, starved and terrorized by more than 24 gangsters. As her health steadily deteriorated and ransom negotiations dragged on, her captors grew increasingly impatient. Her liberation came on January 25, 2012, when the Navy's elite SEAL Team 6 heroically parachuted into the desert and successfully rescued her, along with her colleague. The ordeal is detailed through the perspective of Jessica and her husband Eric in their New York Times best-selling book, Impossible Odds: The Kidnapping of Jessica Buchanan and Her Dramatic Rescue by SEAL Team 6. If you have not read it, I highly recommend it. Jessica and her husband have since relocated to the United States and now reside in the Washington, D.C. area with their 2 children. Eric continues to work in the international development sector, and Jessica travels the country speaking about her experience as a hostage in order to inspire a wide range of audiences. She is a board member for the nonprofit organization Hostage US that seeks to support former hostages and their families. She also continues to serve as a dedicated ambassador for the Navy SEAL Foundation, which works to support the families of fallen SEALs. In her spare time, Jessica will most likely be found outdoors, usually up in the mountains hiking with her family. She's committed to teaching her children the necessity of being outside, the importance of remaining in awe of creation and its creator, and most significantly, what a gift it is to be free. And I just want to add, we sing many songs and read stories and preach and hear stories of sacrifice and suffering, of forgiveness, of service, and of mission. Today we're honored to have with us an alumni who has experienced and processed these themes in some of the most difficult circumstances on earth. She is a 2007 graduate of the University of Valley Forge, and today we are honored to give her the Young Alumni Award. Please welcome to the stage Jessica Buchanan.
It's day 92 in the desert. I think the date is January 24th, but I really just can't be sure anymore. I think it's around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I can tell because the sun is starting to drop down to the right side of my mat, and I wonder for the millionth time, how many more 3 o'clock suns am I going to watch from under this tree? I'm still the only woman I've seen surrounded by dozens of Somali men. They are mad and they have guns. I'm sick. I am in so much pain. High fevers. I can barely stand upright. And as I drag myself to a nearby bush to be sick, they laugh at me, they mock me, ridicule me, they stare at me. A man calling himself Abdi commands that I put on a hijab and follow him out into the desert. He's always in my face screaming, "Where is big money?" He accuses me over and over as if I brought millions of dollars and buried it out in the desert somewhere, and I'm refusing to tell him about it. I explain again, I am a teacher by profession. I am a humanitarian aid worker at heart. I am a woman of very little means. There is no big money. He's tossing an AK-47 from one hand to the other, and he commands that I follow him out into the desert. We walk for 10 minutes, 20 minutes. It's the middle of the day. It is so hot. He stops in some arbitrary place, and he kind of gets down on his knees, and he picks up a stick, and he draws a 7 shakily in the sand. He looks at me and he says, "Your people have 7 days to come up with $18 million, or I'm going to cut your head off." Tears just start streaming down my face. I can't believe this is my reality. He looks at me kind of curiously and just cocks his head to one side and says, "Why are you crying? Is there any humanity in him at all? I wonder." I say simply, "I'm crying because I don't want to die." Several months earlier, in October of 2011, I was happily working for a non-governmental organization in the northern part of Somalia. I was using my education degree to help keep children safe. I held the position as the education advisor for the violence reduction and community safety programs. Basically, what I did was go out and train our staff to go into communities and tell little kids, hey, if you see something shiny on the ground, it's a leftover explosive from the Civil War that your country just went through. Don't pick it up because it'll blow your arms off. It was intense, but it was fulfilling. I felt called. I stood right here where you are now when God called me to Africa. I knew this was what I was born to do. Came time for a field trip to the southern part of Somalia. It's confusing. I won't go into explaining the geography of it all. Let's just say it's not the safest part of the world to be in. I was with my organization. We had security protocols to follow. I did the necessary things to ensure my safety. I'd canceled my training 2 times prior. My husband was also based and working in the area. He's considered a Somalia expert. Neither one of us felt good about this trip. That was my first lesson. I didn't listen. Put it aside, thought I have a job to do. I put my ego above all else, and I got on a UN plane and headed down to Somalia. October 25th, 2011, I conducted my staff training with my colleague. Everything was going well. It was around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We climbed back into our convoy of vehicles, which meant we had a Land Cruiser full of armed guards in the front. We were in the middle vehicle, armed guards with us, armed guards in the third vehicle. We would travel as a convoy back to the guest house. We left the compound. I'm texting my husband. I'm thinking random mundane thoughts like, oh, I wonder what we're having for dinner tonight, and when am I going to get my workout in? Suddenly, our car halts to a stop, and somebody has cut us off on the right side and splashed mud all over our windows and our windshields, and I think, what a jerk. Who drives like that? Suddenly, there is a crack of the butts of AK-47s all over our windows and our windshields. People start screaming. My door is flung open, and there is a very angry Somali man standing there. He's wearing a special police uniform. He gets in, puts an AK to my head, and starts screaming, "Drive!" at the driver. We take off through town, down these camel tracks. We're heading south. That is not a good thing. All I can think at this point are just 2 very basic, very fundamental thoughts. The first thought is, this is so bad. Whatever this is, I have no frame of reference to access how bad this situation that I am in is in. The second thought that I had was, no matter what happens, no matter how this thing turns out, my life, it has changed forever. We drive for a while. The sun goes down. We stop. We change personnel. We drive for some more. We stop. We change vehicles. We do this over and over and over again, long into the night. Finally, we stop. We're out in the middle of the desert. It's just, I can't even describe how black it is, how dark it is. One of the drivers turns around and he says, "Out, get out." So I slide out of the vehicle and I kind of press myself up against it. And he says, "Walk." And it was my last act of free defiance. I just whisper under my breath, "God help me." I say no. Because I don't know what's waiting out there for me, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to be good. "Walk," he says again. No. We go on like this for some time. My colleague who had been taken with me, an older Danish gentleman, comes over to me and he just takes my hand and he says, "Jessica, you know we have to walk." And so hand in hand, we start tripping our way through the desert. We're tripping over thorn bushes. We're picking ourselves back up. We're walking. We're stumbling. This is the single most terrifying moment of my life. I am calling out to God, "Help me." My mother had passed away the year before. I call out to her. I say, help me be dignified. Help me be strong. I say goodbye to my husband, Eric. I say goodbye to my father, my sister, my brother. We walk 20 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe an hour. Then we're told to stop and get down on our knees. I'm waiting. Men start coming out from all directions. They're wearing turbans, chains of ammunition. They're holding these huge machine guns. And in my terror, it looks like they have bayonets stacked onto the ends. And all I can think is my head is going to leave my body. I'm 32 years old. How did I get here? And as I'm crying out to God to save me, I hear the most beautiful word I have ever heard. And that's simply sleep. Lie down in the dirt and go to sleep. They want me to go to sleep. And that's exactly what I did. For the next several weeks, every morning, I woke in the middle of the desert with the same two thoughts. I've woken up in hell. And I don't understand why I am here. I'd come here to help. God had called me to Africa. This was his plan for my life. For this, I spent hours checking my soul. Had I gotten it wrong? Did I misunderstand? One morning, I got up from my mat, and I was on the point of, I was panicking. I felt like I was coming out of my skin. I felt like I was going to become hysterical. And I asked for permission to just walk in small circles. I needed to move. And as I was walking in these circles, I realized the feelings that I was having, the emotions that I was having were the same. They were similar. They were familiar to the morning after my mother died. And we lost her 5 days after she turned 57. We were not expecting it. I felt like my world had fallen apart. And as I was walking in these circles, I remembered I had a very clear picture of the morning after her death. I was in the kitchen with my dad, my sister, my brother-in-law, my brother. It was so quiet you could hear a pin drop, and then my dad asked us to come around the table because he wanted to pray. And he was standing behind a kitchen chair, and he was holding on to the top rung of the chair. His knuckles were white. It was keeping him upright. And we all waited for him to lead us. And he said very simply, Lord, I don't understand you, but I choose to trust you. Tears dripping down into his beard. He'd lost his life partner of 40 years. We'd lost our mother. Lord, I don't understand you, but I choose to trust you. And so as I was having that vision, I did the exact same thing my dad did, and I found a tree out there in the desert, and I found a limb that I could reach, and I held on to the limb of the tree with all my might to keep me standing, and I just did exactly what my dad did. And I said over and over again, Lord, I don't understand you, but I choose to trust you. I don't know why you brought me out here, but I will trust you that you are good and you will save me. Sometimes I had to do that 30 times a day. Sometimes I didn't have a tree to hold on to. Sometimes it was all just in my head because I wasn't allowed to speak. This became my mantra. It became my morning ritual. It became my feeble attempt at acceptance. As days turned into weeks, and the weeks ended up stretching out into unexpected months, those words would propel me forward, keeping me sane, fueling the fire of hope, squelching the thoughts and the temptation of desperation. I don't understand, but I choose to trust. I would sing this when we moved locations 3 or 4 times, out in the middle of rain in the middle of the night. I would sing this when I was starving. I would get a small little handful of dirty rice to eat once a day. I would sing this when I woke in the middle of the desert in the morning, drenched in dew. We were never taken to a house, never taken to a shelter. We slept on a mat out in the middle of the desert every single night. I don't understand you, Lord, but I'm going to trust you. What we did understand is that we were in this for the long haul. So my colleague Paul and I promised each other 2 things. The first one was that we were not going to try to escape. We'd been taken together. We would stay together until we could leave together. The second thing that we promised each other is that we could feel any emotion. We could be angry. We could be sad. We could be frustrated, regret. We could even be happy at some moments. We could laugh. But the one emotion that was off the table was despair. There was no place for despair in this desert. I spent a lot of time thinking. I had a lot of time to think. I spent a lot of time thinking about this notion, this concept of despair. And when I got out, I actually looked up the word. And the definition in the dictionary says despair is a complete loss or absence of hope. No hope. Despair can be a tricky thing. Despair is a deceptive thing. Despair comes to you in your darkest moments. Despair entices you, invites you to come and sit down at her table. Despair offers you an empathetic ear. And because you are so tired of fighting and you feel like you're so alone, despair for a brief moment makes you feel so good. Because as the saying goes, misery loves company. There was a defining moment in my captivity, about 60 days or so, and my colleague had been taken away. I hadn't seen him for weeks. I'd been in solitary confinement. I was not allowed to speak. My voice actually did not work anymore. Again, I had asked for permission to walk in circles so that I could just move. And as I was limping, I was sick. I'd lost so much weight. I could feel despair coming closer and closer. And it's kind of like I came up out of my body in a way, like I had a bird's eye view of myself. And I could see myself limping and hobbling around. And I came to this metaphorical kind of canyon, this deep pit. And I stood there and I really thought about throwing myself in. Like, let's just get this over with, shall we? Let me just give in to the depression and the despair and let go, because I am so tired. I don't know when this thing is going to end. I don't know if it's going to end. And standing there, I rooted my feet down into the ground, and I remember putting my hands, just balling them into fists, thinking, this is the most important decision I will make in my life. And so I got up, and I turned around, and I walked away. And by God's grace, I was able to sit back down under that tree on that mat and continue to wait it out. Because no matter how bad things seemed, I knew in my heart I was not without hope. As believers, we know this. We are never completely without hope. There is no despair. It was getting hard to see, but I trusted the Lord. He had a plan for my life. I didn't understand it. But there was more. There had to be. I had a duty to myself to guard my heart and my mind. I had a responsibility to my family to keep believing, to get up and walk out of there when the time was right. January 16th, 2012, I had what would be my last proof of life call. I talked to our family communicator and told her basically, I'm very, very sick. I don't think I'm going to make it out of here alive. She took the information I assumed back to my family. I went back to my mat. My physical health continued to diminish. A few days later, January 25th, my colleague and I were put back together in the camp. He helps me carry my mat out into the middle of the field as we did every night. I lay down. I'm in so much pain. I had a urinary tract infection that was untreated, and I knew it was going into a kidney infection because I'd had one of those before. No matter what I asked for, no matter how much I begged, the pirates wouldn't bring me any medicine. They would not bring a doctor out. It was to their advantage that I was sick. So I'm laying on my mat, watching the stars come out. There are 2 stars that come out at the same time every night. I didn't know that until I was out there. And I named one for my mother, so she and I would have conversations every night as I would try to fall asleep. This night, usually I tried to remain hopeful and positive. This night I was desperate, and I said, Mama, I need help. I need you to go tell God that he needs to do something now because I am not going to make it out of here. I fell into a fitful sleep. I woke up around midnight with the urge to be sick. And I stood up on my mat and I said, toilet, which is what we always did to ask for permission to leave our mat. There were 9 guys on the ground that night. Usually there was always one awake, keeping guard. This night, everybody was completely passed out. Toilet, I say again. No one wakes up. I have a small little pen light. I pick it up, start flashing it, make my way to the nearest bush. I'm sick, then I come back to my mat. Everybody's still passed out, stone cold asleep. I wrap myself up in my blanket, try to go back to sleep, and then I hear this scratching noise. Sounds like these big bugs that would come out at night, these big giant beetles. They would come out at night and they would get in my clothes, they would get in my hair, and I just wasn't really in the mood. So I stood up and I shook my blanket out and shook my clothes, but there were no beetles, but I could hear the scratching. I could hear them coming. I do this a couple of times, finally decide, forget it, I just need to sleep. Not 30 seconds goes by after I've settled myself back down, and the pirate laying closest to me, a guy that we nicknamed Helper, he jumps up, and I can't really see anything because there's no moon. The stars had disappeared. Everything had clouded over. It was so dark again. But I can sort of see the outline of his face. I pull the blanket away, and it's just sheer terror. And he's holding an AK, and he starts kind of whisper screaming to the guys, basically in Somali, get up, get up, get up. There's mumblings and stirrings, and the other guys are starting to get up, and then the night just erupts into automatic gunfire. Pull the blanket back over my face, and I try to make myself as small as I possibly can, just kind of almost like trying to make a hole with the force of my energy down into the ground, trying to get down into the ground. And I'm just saying, oh God, oh my God, oh God. I am not going to make it out of this alive, oh God. I'm hearing the worst sounds I could possibly hear, men breathing their last breaths. They're being shot. They're dropping to the ground. They're moaning. Suddenly, somebody grabs my arms and my legs, and they start shaking me. And the blanket's pulled away from my face, and I'm fighting with the last bit of strength that I have. I'm thinking it's another group who's come to take us, another kidnapping group. And then suddenly I hear my name. And it's a young guy with an American accent, and he sounds just like my brother. And he says, Jessica. Jessica, honey, it's okay. It's okay. Stop hitting me. We're the American military. We're going to take you home. You're safe now. He helps me sit up, and I just start shaking. I'm in shock. And all I can say over and over again is, you're American? You're American? He gives me water, and he gives me medicine. He says, we've been watching you for a long time. One of them says, okay, do you know where your shoes are? Because we got to walk. I say, no. So he picks me up and he throws me over his shoulder and he just starts running like a movie off into whatever is the safe space out in the desert. He puts me down. Of course, my first question is, do you know where my colleague Paul is? Did he make it out alive? And he's right there. And he says, Jessica, do you know who these guys are? I say, Paul, I really don't care. These guys are SEAL Team 6. They're the guys that rid the world of Osama bin Laden. President Obama sent them in to get us. They knew we were here all along. We're on a plane. We're heading to a military base somewhere. I'm getting ready to be reunited with my husband for the first time in 93 days. I'm sitting there with my back against the plane, everybody celebrating, hooping and hollering, and I have no voice. I think I have lost all my social skills. And then this young man, this soldier, he just comes over to me, and so quietly and gently and sweetly gets down on his knees, and he hands me a folded package parcel. I look down and I see it's an American flag. He just says, welcome home, Jessica. And then the tears. And then the voice. They come. I was delivered. In the most awesome way my physical body will ever experience. So I had some other things I was going to say, but we're running out of time. I just want to say that when you are in the deepest pit, because you're young now, maybe you haven't experienced it, but it will come, because that is life. Corrie ten Boom, courageous survivor of the Holocaust, says there is no pit so deep that God's love is not deeper still. And I can tell you, standing right here, that is the truth. And when you are in that pit, when you are struggling with whatever it is, because we all struggle, we're human. That's the gift of being human, is the struggle. I know that now. Remember this little school teacher from Ohio somehow fell in love with a place, fell in love with a man, fell in love with her God. because the struggle is a gift that brings with it acknowledgement and understanding. And I can say I'm grateful for it today. I know it sounds weird. But that's his plan all along. Let's pray. Creator God, we thank you for saving us over and over and over again. We thank you that you know the desires of our hearts and that you want the best for us, and you bring to fruition what you have planned for us and what it is you know that we need. God, I ask right now for these adults who are going out into the world to serve and to follow your plan, that you give them strength. You give them strength to endure the struggle. You give them acceptance, and you give them peace in the middle of the storm. Because we know that you have a plan for us. You have not forsaken us. You never will. We give you praise. We give you glory.